Class is in session, students. Hello there, guys. Your professor today is CD Mangaka, and today we're going to be taking the economic concept of opportunity cost and dissecting how it relates to the video game League of Legends. So, let's start on off with an example of a story. Say you're in solo queue, you're waiting, you're close to the bottom, and so you're following pick order, and so you're going to be like one of the last couple people to select the role they get, the champion they get. You're looking on through the enemy team's comp as they're going through picking their champions, and you notice it's really heavy on the AD. It's like a Hecarim top, we'll say like a Jarvan or a Rek'Sai okay, jungle, excuse me, a Zed mid, and then they got their ADC, and then their support, it's like a Leona or like a really low damage support. Right now, you're looking at it and saying, hey, Malphite would be a really good pick to use against that composition. He stacks armor really well, and he gets extra damage for stacking the armor. He gives himself armor, and he had great engage to lock down that enemy line. Malphite would be a really great pick. However, the guy before you is like, nah, man, I'm going to play Galio top. His ultimate's going to be great. Okay, so what's the matter with Galio top? It's got a good ultimate, but you look at the passive, and Galio wants to build magic resistance to make use of that, not armor, and so... Whereas Malphite would do great by stacking armor, Galio doesn't benefit as much as Malphite does. That's the opportunity cost of someone taking that specific situation and picking a different champion for it. So that's the story of it. Now, I think we have to go in a little bit and explore what is opportunity cost and then see how it relates to League of Legends on several levels. So, opportunity cost is defined by the new, I think it was New America Oxford Dictionary. Hold on, class. Your professor is pulling up some of his notes. New Oxford American Dictionary. It defines it as the loss of potential gain from other alternatives when one alternative is chosen. What does that all mean? Basically, say you have a bunch of choices, but you can only pick one of those choices, okay? What that means is that when you pick a choice, you give up the opportunity of picking that other choice. So let's look at food, for example. All right, say you have $5. That's enough to buy you some snacks, a hamburger, or a taco, okay? Now, each one of those comes with its own advantages. By buying the snacks, okay, you get to eat those in the car. Say you're traveling in this case. You get to eat those in the car, and so you can just keep on your trip, and you get a little munch along the way. For a hamburger, though, say it's going to fill you up, and you're not going to need any food for a couple of hours, and the same thing with the taco. However, the hamburger... In order to eat that, you have to stay at the place which is serving it. It's not a fast food place. You have to sit down and eat it, which is going to cut back on your travel time. For the taco, though, say that you can eat that on the road, but there's a risk then of you having to stop in order to go to the bathroom because the taco just goes right through your system. So you can only pick one of those options because you can only have $5 and all those things cost that much money, we'll say. And each of them come with their own gain and benefit, but by choosing one, you're going to give up the ability to choose the other two. So that's opportunity cost as illustrated with food. Let's talk about League of Legends. In League... Because we're talking about cost here, I think the first case that's going to come up to everyone's minds is the item shop. You have a limited amount of gold and you have to invest that in a certain way. And whenever you invest it in a particular way, you give up the ability to buy something else, okay? If you're an AP champion mid lane and you rush Azonias, you give the ability to build like a Morellonomicon or a Theens, that's giving up the CDR and the magic resistance. If you're an ADC, and you itemize attack speed first, then you're giving up the opportunity to go for AD and maximize your trade potential, and then you could potentially fall behind. Or say that you back as an ADC and you pick up a BF Sword and Pots. That's great, but maybe you needed to go with like a pickaxe and a boots instead because it's an even lane matchup and you're having a hard time dodging some skill shots and you just want to get the most out of your gold and just kind of go for an all-around build. Alright, that's a couple of examples of opportunity costs within the League of Legends and the item shop, and those choices will be revolving around which champions that you pick. So, that's the meat of it, by the way, when it comes to League of Legends opportunity cost is the champions you choose. If we had to really come up with a definition of what the meta is, it would be the champion picks which incur the least amount of opportunity cost for a person to use. So what does that mean? It means like these are the best champions to play because by picking these champions, you are sacrificing the least amount of opportunity to play other champions in those roles, either because those champions are better than those roles, they have certain skills which your team needs, they synergize in certain ways. That would be like a definition of the meta, okay? So let's look at the example I talked about earlier with Malphite and Galio. Against a heavy AD lineup, Malphite would be great against that. Galio, not so much, just because of how their kits revolve around stacking armor for Malphite and magic resistance for Galio. Likewise, though, against a heavy AP lineup, Malphite wouldn't be as good of a pick because he wants to stack armor, and against AP, he has to build magic resistance, whereas Galio would be great because now he doesn't have to itemize armor. Instead, he can just get a bunch of magic resist and add damage into his kit. That's the opportunity cost in which you pick. And when you pick a certain champion over another, then you have to adjust your playstyle to that, okay? If you pick like an early game top laner, Whereas your opponent picks a late game scaling top lane, you got to win in the early game in order to get a lead and snowball it out. Likewise, though, if you pick a late game scaling top laner, all right, and your whole team also picks late game scaling, then you're losing ability to contest objectives early unless all of you just outplay your enemy opponents. That's the opportunity cost in the pick phase, all right? And you have to think of it this way. There's a finite amount of resources when it comes to the pick phase. There's only 10 players, 5 on your side, 5 on the enemy, and there's going to be 6 bans as well. Out of 120-something champions, you're only going to have a couple of choices out of that. First off, you have to wait for 6 champions to be taken away from you. Say, okay, no one's playing those. And then 9 other people are going to pick champions, and those 9 other people are going to say, you can't play this champion because I'm going to be playing this champion. So there's an opportunity cost you revolve around there, is who's playing what. And, you know, maybe this is a bigger deal because maybe you're a more skilled, like, Hecarim player than this other guy who's, like, playing it first time. There's an opportunity cost there in terms of who gets what champions, who's picking what things. Furthermore, when it comes to opportunity cost, don't you hate when you have those brain farts, students? It's just kind of a little frustrating. When you have those moments where you can look at the compositions and you can decide what champions you want to play, there's also a factor in which role you send that champion, okay? Champions who can play multiple roles. So let's look at Hecarim, since I've been using him a lot in this video. But traditionally, Hecarim's been used as a jungler, and so he would be played in the jungle, and he'd be okay. He had great ganks, but he's really gold reliant because he has a lot of just like flat stats, not really a whole lot of percent stacks, which means that in order to get damage, he has to build items. So for him to play in the jungle, he'd be a bit gold starving, be really snowball reliant. That's why we don't see a lot of him in competitive play, or didn't see a lot of him. Now, though, because people are starting to take him to the top lane, and he's shown that, hey, he can lane in top lane, he does really well there. Hey, he's getting more gold and experience out of there, so he can snowball without being so risky like a jungle pick, and then we can play these other really good junglers in there. Now there's an opportunity cost, so if right now, if you play Hecarim and you say, you know what, I'm going to take him into the jungle, you're giving up the opportunity to take Hecarim, who is right now a better top laner than a jungler, and saying, hey, nobody can play him top, even though he does really well there, and still we're going to have to play in the jungle. So there's a cost there of playing him in a different role. Furthermore, when you play Hecarim in the jungle, you're giving up the opportunities to play other junglers who are better than him. Junglers like Sejuani and Gragas, they're better because they're not so item reliant like he is, so they don't have to get these early kills. They can just farm up, and since because they have percent health damage in their kits, they just have these really great base stats so that in order to deal damage, they don't need items, first off. And then secondly, they bring so much utility in there that they'll always be useful. So Sejuani will always be great as long as it hits the right targets. Gragas will always be great as long as it hits the right targets. They don't really need items to be effective, even though items do help. Hecarim, much more item reliant. And so you're kind of seeing then how opportunity cost is playing a role in not only just deciding what champions to play in a role, but also where to play a specific champion in that role. And deconstructing those things and finding the ways to minimize the risk that you incur by picking a champion is going to help your play exponentially, because whenever there's something that exists that's always better or the best, if you could play it at that correct level, at the level which is appropriate, it's always going to be a better pick. This is why we kind of like see pro players trend towards certain picks and certain roles. It's why Thresh will always be picked up as support, because he just has so much utility and he's always going to be useful, whereas a Gangplank support we're probably never going to see in competitive play, barring like a massive rework on him which encourages him to build support. So that's the opportunity cost from economics as applied to League of Legends. There's a cost in deciding how you use your gold, sure, but the more interesting cost is when what you decide which champions you're going to pick, whether it's, hey, I'm going to play this champion in top lane rather than the jungle, or maybe I'm going to play in mid rather than top. It's like, I'm going to play this champion against this composition in this role rather than this champion choice. And when you begin to look and you begin to understand which champion picks are the best, either just all around safe picks or in particular scenarios, and you begin to build that knowledge up and you practice those champions and you master those champions, you're going to be able to improve your league career by being able to take advantage of the choices which you have and begin to develop an understanding of the game and realize why these picks go through. So that is opportunity cost in League of Legends class. Lecture time is over. Go ahead, head to your next course. I'll be right here waiting for the next group. Thanks for coming in, guys. CD Mangaka, signing out.